It looks like a famous movie, but it is. The brutal truth, a truth buried for decades, has only recently been brought to light in recent years in South Korea, where there was once a concentration camp that was likened to a genocide or a region. Like the real-life Squid Game, the story was only revealed and the public was outraged thanks to this famous documentary, and they stepped in to find the victims who had been silent for over 25 years. When you learn about locations you only heard about during World War II and beyond, such as the extermination and concentration camps, you will be astounded. We're together, and you're watching Mysterious Crimes Channel. Please help me reach my dream of 10,000 subscribers by hitting the subscribe button and joining our true crime community. In a quiet corner of South Korea, a dark truth lay buried for decades, a truth so harrowing it rivaled the most haunting scenes from a dystopian movie. The Brothers Home Welfare Center, deceptively named and hidden under the guise of charity, was no sanctuary. Instead, it was a hellscape where innocence perished and humanity was stripped away. Today, we unravel the story that inspired whispers of connection to the globally famous Squid Game. But unlike the fictional series, this was no game. It was a real-life nightmare. It was 1982 when a bright young boy named Trung, only 12 years old, vanished. Trung was the kind of son every parent dreamed of, intelligent, kind, and mature beyond his years. Despite his tender age, he cared for his ailing mother, cooking meals and managing their modest household. That year, Trung had placed first in his school exams, a testament to his diligence. Life, however, had other plans. One fateful evening, Trung's mother noticed the clock ticking well past his usual return time. Hours turned to dread-filled nights. Where was her boy? She couldn't have known that Trung's life had taken an irrevocable turn the moment two policemen approached him as he explored the nearby city with a neighbor. Trung, naive and trusting, thought nothing of following them. They promised to take him home. Instead, they drove him into a nightmare. A year later, another child, 7-year-old Lee, met a similar fate. Lee and her brother had been playing near their home when the police appeared. The siblings were ushered into a white truck with no explanation. The vehicle's interior was dark and suffocating, filled with other bewildered children and adults. We are strongly reminded of the film by it. There is some enigmatic car in the film. People will be taken away by the secret and vanish into thin air. The truck stopped at a mysterious facility surrounded by high walls and steel gates. Inside, the siblings encountered uniformed guards with cruel eyes. It was really like a prison cell with heavy steel doors that could only be locked from the outside and inside. These long rooms were rows and rows of beds that could hold at least 80 to 100 people. Again, do you see any coincidence? Her question was met with silence. The cries of children echoed around them, only to be silenced by the brutal force of the guards. It was here that Lee and Trung's lives and the lives of countless others would intersect in unimaginable suffering. The facility was called the Brothers Home Welfare Center, but the word welfare was a grotesque lie. The newcomers were stripped of their clothes, their hair shaved off, and their names replaced with numbers. Trung became number 128, and Lee was reduced to number 437. Rows of uniformed prisoners, children and adults alike, stood silently, their hollow eyes betraying their stories of torment. The facility was a prison, masquerading as a charity. Guards patrolled the grounds with batons and dogs, ensuring that no one dared attempt escape. The living conditions were abysmal: overcrowded dormitories, shared toothbrushes, and meager rations that left everyone skeletal. Trung later recalled, even rats weren't safe. People ate whatever they could find to survive. The actual photos of these camps are like something out of a horror movie, rows and rows of identical buildings. These buildings are also intersected by high concrete walls and, above all, right. Even if you try to escape, there will be guards standing guard, blocking off the entire area. This is an isolated area again. This reminds me of the Squid Game, how that particular location is only hidden in the woods. Also, these areas are very deeply hidden, and you would really have to hunt or know the woods well to find this place. The crazy thing is, this area is like a small town, has everything from church, factory, school to barbershop, and even bathing area. And of course, later we will know this is not the only location. There are a few different locations all over Korea. At dawn, a piercing alarm shattered the fragile silence, jolting everyone awake. Sleep-deprived and terrified, Prisoners scrambled into perfect lines, shivering in the chilly morning air. They were forced to sing hymns and patriotic songs, songs that felt like cruel mockery to those stripped of their dignity. For newcomers like Trung, confusion turned to panic when guards struck anyone who faltered, their batons cracking like thunder. Daily life was a grinding cycle of forced labor. Children as young as 7 were thrust into factories to produce fishing rods and other goods. Trung's small hands quickly blistered and bled, the relentless work making healing impossible. By night, the wounds were caked with dirt, and by morning they would reopen. For women, the suffering extended beyond the grueling labor. Abuse was rampant. The guards wielded their power mercilessly, treating the women as objects to exploit. Pregnant women were injected with mysterious substances, their cries of anguish echoing through the barracks as they miscarried. "We weren't people to them," one survivor recalled years later. "We were machines, tools, and sometimes nothing more than their entertainment." Meals were barely sustenance. A thin gruel with a stale piece of bread was all the nourishment they were given. Many resorted to eating rats or weeds growing in the cracks of the walls. Diseases spread unchecked, and death became a grim companion. The truth about the Brothers Home Welfare Center revealed a web of corruption and indifference. Officially, the facility was part of a government initiative to clean up the streets ahead of the 1988 Seoul Olympics. The goal was to beautify the city, presenting an image of prosperity and order to the world. But behind this facade was a perverse system incentivizing cruelty. For every individual detained, the government provided funding to the center. Mr. Park, the man in charge, had turned this program into a grotesque money-making machine. Each prisoner represented cash in his pocket, and the forced labor they performed further lined his coffers. Factories owned by Park churned out products on the backs of unpaid labor, the profits flowing directly to him. Park wielded his power like a shield, claiming protection from high-ranking officials in the government. His arrogance was palpable. "You can't touch me," he reportedly told investigators. "This is bigger than you." In December 1986, a prosecutor named Kim stumbled upon the facility during a hunting trip. It was a chilling coincidence that brought him to the edge of the compound. What he saw left him shaken. Lines of workers, many of them children, being herded like cattle by guards armed with batons and accompanied by vicious dogs. One scene haunted him. A group of prisoners being shoved into a cage, their feet shackled, their faces drained of hope. They were barely human anymore, Kim later recounted. It was as if their souls had been beaten out of them. Determined to act, Kim launched an investigation. He uncovered shocking details. Over 3,000 people were imprisoned at the brothers' home, including 900 children. The living conditions were inhumane, the forced labor relentless. His discovery of $20 million in cash hidden in Park's office exposed the sheer scale of corruption. But Kim's fight for justice was met with resistance. High-ranking officials, complicit in the system, pressured him to drop the case. "This is above you," they warned. Kim's faith in the system crumbled as he realized the rot extended to the highest levels of government. The facility closed in 1988, but for the survivors, the nightmare didn't end. Many were left broken, both physically and emotionally. Trung, now a young man, found it impossible to reconnect with the world. "I was 12 when they took me," he said. "By the time I left, I didn't know who I was anymore." Some survivors tried to seek justice, but the courts dismissed their cases, citing expired statutes of limitations. The stigma of their pasts clung to them like a shadow, making it difficult to find work or acceptance in society. For many, the trauma was insurmountable, leading to lives of poverty and isolation. In 2020, after years of protests, the case was reopened. Survivors camped outside the courts for over 900 days, demanding recognition and reparations. Yet even now, justice remains elusive. The system that once enslaved them seems unwilling to acknowledge its sins. The Brothers Home Welfare Center stands as a testament to human cruelty and the resilience of its victims. The horrors endured within its walls may have inspired fictional tales like Squid Game, but the real story is far more haunting. It's a story of betrayal by those in power, of innocence destroyed, and of a fight for justice that continues to this day. The global phenomenon Squid Game captured the imagination of millions with its gripping narrative of desperation, betrayal, and survival. At its core, it depicted a brutal system exploiting vulnerable individuals for the amusement and profit of those in power. But while Squid Game is fictional, the parallels to the Brothers Home Welfare Center are striking. In both stories, individuals were stripped of their identities. In the Welfare Center, names were replaced with numbers. In Squid Game, players donned numbered uniforms, becoming faceless entities in a cruel game. The common thread is the loss of individuality, a tool used by oppressors to dehumanize and control. The controlled environments were eerily similar. The Welfare Center was an isolated prison with towering walls and armed guards, ensuring no escape. In Squid Game, the arena was a concealed labyrinth, trapping players in a psychological and physical battleground. But the most chilling connection is the systemic nature of the cruelty. Both in the Welfare Center and the fictional game, the suffering of the many fueled the power and greed of the few. Mr. Park and his government protectors profited from forced labor and exploitation, just as the shadowy figures in Squid Game profited from the bloodshed of the desperate. These parallels remind us that reality often surpasses fiction in its horrors. While Squid Game ends with a protagonist reclaiming agency, the survivors of the brothers' home are still fighting for theirs. Their battle for justice is ongoing, their trauma a lingering scar that society has yet to fully acknowledge. The true tragedy lies in how easily systems of oppression can flourish when greed, power, and apathy converge. The Brothers Home Welfare Center is not just a story of South Korea's past. It is a warning to the world about the consequences of unchecked authority and systemic dehumanization. As we conclude this harrowing tale, let us not forget the resilience of those who endured it. Their stories, though painful, demand to be told and remembered. If this narrative has moved you, consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Together, we can ensure these stories are never forgotten and continue to shine a light on the darkest corners of history.